Good morning, Roz. How are you? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Carmen. Good morning. How are you? I'm doing well. It's the new year, fresh start, New Year's resolutions. Let's see if we can hold to them.
I know every year we make
Every
the
year.
same or similar resolutions, and in the end, it's like learn to say no and
Yes.
not going to work as much and going to take some time for self-care. And that's
Care.
what today's presentation is about, right? So, teachers
Exactly.
practice self-care. Why? Well, to start off with, this little summary here, like what do I do to self-care, is linked to a website that is called Positive Discipline, right? It's by two doctors, and they offer advice on training for parents, teachers, and schools. So I highly recommend clicking on this and going to it because they have some very interesting materials there and resources. So, what's the agenda today? What are we going to be talking about today? Well, we're going to be talking about toxic workplaces. Is your workplace toxic? Why? What some experts say about it, how we can avoid the toxic traps, and how to amend our toxic thinking, because sometimes we get caught up in other people's negativity, and unfortunately it makes us negative even though we aren't. Okay, so first things first, do you hear at your workplace comments along these lines, or do you even think things like, I used to eat lunch in the staff lounge, but I don't anymore because it's really toxic in there. These students simply can't learn, or parents aren't doing their jobs at home. So how do they expect us to do the job at school? And I want to overcome challenges, not just dwell on them. Or he or she has such a negative aura about him or her that I hate running into him or her these days. So, comments for you, Ross. What do you think about these?
Um, Unfortunately, I hate to admit it, there's a lot of the conversations that I've witnessed myself, overhearing or even myself saying things like, I can't eat lunch in the staff lounge anymore because I'm so busy. I have a working lunch. I eat at my desk, because I still have to finish something that has to be done. I've heard things like, oh, and I'm guilty of saying it's like they always keep piling everything on us. We don't have enough time. It's like, when do we get to teach? Teaching used to be fun, and creative. Now it's all a lot of bureaucracy and accountabilities, and not saying some of those things aren't warranted. It's just that it seems like it's just piled on so much that, the joy of teaching has gone out of it. So yeah, I can quite relate to some of those comments. I've definitely heard them, and I do feel them in the profession as an educator. I do feel some of these things a lot, especially post COVID. It was pre-COVID, but I think it's gotten even worse post COVID.
Yeah, unfortunately, you'd think that after going through a world pandemic and the whole world being on basically on lockdown and being isolated, you'd think that it would have brought out the best in people and that people would be more caring and more empathetic, but doesn't seem that way. People seem to be even angrier and even more aggressive and individualistic, but I guess that's a topic for another day, so let's
Yeah.
move on. So these two researchers have, well, I found these two researchers and their quotes, and I thought that they were very interesting because it speaks about two different facets of being burnt out and why teachers need to look after themselves before they can deal with problems in the classroom. And this has a lot to do with all of this emotional intelligence and social and emotional
Emotional learning.
learning and
Mhm.
so forth. Because if the teacher isn't 100%, how can they deal with situations in their classrooms where they're dealing with conflict, and the conflict that each of the students brings to the class. So first of all, negative organizations, right? Or toxic organizations. So some of the aspects that you find in these negative organizations, and we've been there, done that. That's actually one of those places is where we met. One of the first things is work stability. I mean, how can you not feel burnt out? How can you feel relaxed in an environment where you don't know if your contract is going to be renewed? And as a matter of fact, they use that as
Leverage.
a wet leverage, or as well, yeah, leverage. I was going to say as a weapon, but I don't like that word. But they use it as a tool to make you work harder, to make demands on you,
Micromanage a lot.
Yeah, but sometimes they're even dishonest, because they offer you a position, and then once you get there and you start that position, all of a sudden they throw things at you that
Are
are
not in your job
definitely not in
description.
your contract, right? And even the work culture is terrible. And I guess that depends on a lot on the country. And then the second quote is talking about negative colleagues, and how negative colleagues that are always complaining. We've worked in environments where people have complained an awful lot because of the country. And I've always wondered, like, what the heck are you still doing here? I mean, okay, so you're here because of the money, but that's about it. And you can't go to a place just because of the money, because in the end, it changes you. You lose, like you said, if within a normal environment you lose the joy of teaching, in a place where the environment, the outside of the classroom, the country is hostile. Well, imagine what repercussions that hostility has on you as a teacher, and as a teacher in the classroom working with other students. And then another thing that I found interesting as well, and that's why I included these two quotes, was negativity can spread like an infectious disease. And I think that I agree with that statement 100%, because negativity breeds negativity, and hostility breeds hostility. I mean, it's really difficult to remain positive and smiling and trying to hold on to the good parts when everything that is around you is telling you otherwise, right?
That's true. Of course, we have an expression there's an expression that says, negative Nancy. There's always going to be a negative Nancy in any workplace that's always going to complain about everything, no matter how, if it's positive, they're going to find something negative about it. But a lot of times we have to ask ourselves, well, why do we have such negative Nancy's? Because sometimes they have been with these organizations for a very long time, and they've seen change happen. And sometimes, unfortunately, change isn't change for the better. It might be change for the worse. So they've seen the organization go through certain things. And I guess that's the other thing. It has an effect upon them themselves that maybe made them into that negative Nancy. And that's the sad part about it, that they've been with the organization because whatever reason they really want to be there. But the organization has changed so much that maybe that a lot of the things didn't change to a positive, it changed to a negative and created these negative Nancy's. That's another aspect of it that a lot of people have another lens to look through, that sometimes organizations create these negative comments or these negative Nancy's, or people that come to complain, or the criticism, or like you said, and it spreads. So a lot of times people are like, oh, these people are, no, how did they become that way? They never started as negative Nancy's. What happened to them to become this way? So that's the key question a lot of times organizations have to ask themselves is, how did I create such negative Nancy's in my organization? What happened? Because when we hire people in any organization, you hire people that want to be there. Yep. They want to be there. And what happened for them to be complaining so much. They still want to be there because they can leave if they really wanted to, right? They can leave, right? But they still want to be there, so it must be they have some joy of it. It's like, and that's just a profession. Teachers want to be teachers because they enjoy teaching, but so much has happened in the profession that we're like, oh, it's not the same as this, and we start, but we want to be there. There's that want and passion still there because that's what you want to do. So that's the key, actually. I think sometimes, Carmen, we have to think about is like, how did they become that negative? How, why, where did it come from? It was created. So.
Yeah, because of the work culture and because of the work ethic.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So how can we avoid these toxic traps? Well, first of all, avoid complainers. And it may not be that easy, especially if it's not a very big organization. But
or if everybody's complaining.
That's true as well. But one of the things that through experience I've realized is, okay, if there's often an ethic in which you meet after work for whatever and you get together, especially when you're in a foreign country, and you tend to hang out with people from the organization that are working with you and our colleagues. So you kind of prolong that agony. It's not just at the workplace, but also outside of the workplace. So many times we have to think about, okay, so no, I'm not going to hang out with you because you're just going to make me feel even worse the time that we're supposed to be out and having fun, right? And avoiding areas, that goes to the next one. If there's a conversation where you overhear that people are already complaining, well, just like don't go there, just stay away. Okay. And then on the other hand, try to acknowledge the situation and okay, so this is not the situation that we want, but let's try and offer solutions, like like when you're overwhelmed with work and you talk to your boss and say, okay, so I need an extended deadline. I can't do this by myself. I need some support, like maybe one of the students that can help you out. It depending on the situation, your teaching situation, right? And then talk to people that have a positive attitude and that are on the same wavelength as you and that are experiencing burnout as well, and see what you can do together to overcome that burnout, that feeling. And of course, talk to your leadership, although sometimes talking to your leadership, either you're not close enough to that leadership to be able to talk to them, or that leadership does not want to hear what your suggestions are, because it's a rigid, like top to bottom hierarchized situation, and like, I'm the boss, I'm the one that knows best, and you will do as you're told. So sometimes
it's not a bottom up kind of aspect.
it's not something that you can work with, or you can offer your solutions or your suggestions. Remember when we tried to do the UDL in a certain context, and that was like an uphill battle, because in that context, first of all, they weren't even acknowledging that there were students that had learning difficulties, because it was not socially acceptable to acknowledge that. So when you're in a situation like that, it becomes very difficult to think about yourself and like take a step back and relax and say, okay, we are going to deal with this. And I wanted to use you as an example, because our friendship, our collaboration, we started at a more or less, if not toxic, at least in an institution where it was hard and the country was difficult and the situation was not the best of all situations. And I think that because we had each other and we supported each other through all of those hard times, I think that was something that was that helped us through that. So I think that having a buddy, having somebody that you can talk to, and you identify your burnout triggers, you identify what's happening to you, and you find someone that can help you within the organization because they know the organization. Sometimes that's not possible either,
Mhm.
but
Which
at
I
least it
yeah.
is it's very helpful. Don't you think so? At least in our
Yeah.
situation, it was.
Yes, it's very helpful when you have a buddy system and you can have that caring listening ear, because everybody needs that person to vent to and vice versa. And I think that's also true to the fact that I think given the times, I have seen some organizations are trying very much to help their employees or their staff not be burned out. Like, they're buying them lunch, they're doing little things. But what happens sometimes is the situation has gone so far that these little things don't help anymore, because it's, for example, I can use an example of like the healthcare situation here in the United States. A lot of nurses are burnt out because of the pandemic and they're short staffed. And a lot of their hospitals and organizations are trying to compensate for that burnout and for that. But I think because if you see something happening and you let it go and you haven't addressed it right away, it comes to a point where when you are trying to address it, that the individuals are not receptive to it because they feel like you didn't care when it was time for you to care. Now why? So it's a kind of like a catch-22 or a double-ended sword kind of situation when you're in a leadership position and having to recognize that I have to have burnout benchmarks built into my organization. So I know, for example, if you're talking about the school system, we know we start school late August to June in most places. Well, at least across the United States and the UK. Some places, it's a little bit different, the school year. But either way, it's from one point to one point. And having to know, like, okay, we need burnout markers here. Each quarter or each benchmark time, I need to put something in place to give some kind of self-care to my employees or my teachers or my staff, because I know that they've going to be going through a certain amount of stuff, especially when we know it's testing season here that starts January through March. And that's by the time from January to March, I think a lot of teachers start reevaluating, do I still want to teach? Maybe I should do real estate. They start thinking around that times. And usually this is when they need those burnout barriers. Sometimes lunch, breakfast, and I've worked in organizations where they've done that. Like they'll surprise you with lunch, or they'll surprise you with breakfast, or they even, if the budget permits, they'll give you some sort of like gift card to go enjoy something on them, like a meal or something like that. So those things are very important. And you're right, we have to find opportunities to laugh and adopt to healthy habits, and getting enough sleep and things like that, is very important. And because sometimes we just can't control the situation. It is what it is.
That leads us to our next slide, which is how to amend that toxic thinking, or what things can you do? So everybody knows this, but it's so difficult, like things that you can't control, you shouldn't be thinking about or dwelling about, or just like going over and over and over again about, but it's easier said than done. And even though we know it's an objective fact and a truth. For instance, our building is ages old. It needs to be refurbished. And we don't, right now we're working online simply because we don't have a space for the whole of the school, and there's only 12 of us. So there's not 12 teachers, staff members. So there isn't a space where all of us can fit together. And so I've been trying to reclaim this space, and it's just not happening. So, it's like hitting a brick wall. Another thing, we need a cleaner. We need a stable cleaner that is with us like every day of the week. She only comes 3 days a week for an hour and a half. We're talking about the the administrative part of the school, not the academic part where the offices are. Okay, so and this person is on a part-time contract and she's only there when we're there, and she only comes in 3 days a week for 6 hours. I mean, like to clean, it's like 100-meter apartment. So, you know, I try to disconnect and I try to not think about it, but it's something that I want to get done. And so I resorted to sending in to my bosses, to the administration, I resorted to sending in a weekly letter. Every single week, I send in the same letter. I changed the date and I changed, like how long we've been waiting for a solution. And lo and behold, just before we went on Christmas holidays, the architect came to have a look around and he totally agreed with the situation and that it needs solving. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed because by January the 15th, we will have a full-fledged report on what needs to be done. We'll have a quote as to how much money has to be spent. And then the next step will be pestering the organization and the government, the educational part of the ministry, in order to get that funding to get it fixed. So that's just like an example. And it's something that burns you out. It's something that takes its toll on you. And fortunately, because I have the other two members on my management team are not negative Nancy's, but positive and enthusiastic, and they're my support. So I think that it's important to have like your little support system within your organization or within your colleagues, somebody that's there, like we said before, that you need somebody that is there that like you've had a bad period and you can just like go out and vent. That is something that is necessary, or somebody that you can call and tell about what just happened. Okay, so another thing, moving on, is learning about the difference between growth mindset and fixed mindset. I have the next slide, or the slide after that, we see that in a little bit more detailed. Okay, but basically it's like growth mindset is I can do things versus I can't do this. All right, it's like removing the negativity within yourself and changing towards a positive attitude, right? The next point was finding that healthy place to vent, either within the organization where you are, or somebody that you can call. Or I know that I can always send you a WhatsApp message and tell you, like this is terrible, and just tell you what's going on, and know that you're there to support me. Right.
To add to that really quickly, a lot of times too, we will have a lot of institutions have say from the higher ups, the leadership, they would say, okay, this is a safe space right now. My office is a safe space. You can come and tell me anything. I'm not going to hold it against you in any kind of way. And that's important. That's very important to have those safe spaces, and having leadership say that, because that helps the organization avoid those toxic situations, becoming a toxic environment where they can take it. And for leadership to say also, I hear you, I've read the feedback, I see what you're saying, I get it, I will do my best to try to, however, why, this is the reason, if it can't be, this is the reason why. And I think a lot of times, like if you have that open dialogue and you're transparent, that also helps avoid those toxic thinkings and things like that, because then people understand the reason why. A lot of times we'll be like, well, this is what you have to do now, but we don't understand why. And that can lead to that toxic thinking and environment if you don't have all that transparency.
I agree with you 100%. Like being in a leadership position myself, I think that my teachers appreciate the fact that I tell them, like, this is what's going on. These are the reasons behind my decisions or
Mhm.
our decisions as the management team. And I think they appreciate that. They know, like if they ask for a particular time off and I can't give it to them, they I have to justify why I can't do that,
Mhm.
because otherwise it's not something whimsical. It's not something that I do because I don't like you. It's not something that I do because I'm going to give that time to somebody else. No, it's
Mhm.
I can't give you that time off, even though I wish I could, but I can't, because there's a rule that says that you have to be here from a certain time to a certain time, and I can't let you go.
Mhm.
Right? Journal your frustrations. I do this a lot. Sometimes when I'm really annoyed and when I'm feeling really bad, I write.
Mhm.
And I know that it's, for some people it doesn't work, but for me it does. And other times I try to laugh. I find something that will make me laugh, because at least in my case, it makes me feel better.
Oh, that was that expression that they say, I rather laugh than cry, right? Because you gotta laugh about it, or else I'm gonna cry about it. That's
Yeah.
exactly where it comes in to play here. And a lot of us have been doing that lately. So look, let's just laugh about it. It's nothing we can really do, because if we don't, we're gonna cry. So let's not cry, let's laugh.
That's true. And then the obvious one, like establish like healthy rituals
Mhm.
and getting enough sleep. And I liked this one, like wash your hands and get outside. I thought that this was really funny because it's the way that they explained it is, like just
Symbolic.
going somewhere, washing
Uh,
your hands and saying, okay,
Like
getting
I'm washing away
dirty,
it all and
washing
I'm going
away
out very soon.
all of this negativity, and then just step outside, take a deep breath, and then go back and start all over again. Okay,
Yeah.
this is the slide that I said about the fixed versus the growth mindset, and I thought we don't have to go over this because we've dealt with this in another section. But basically, the characteristics of the fixed mindset go along with like don't, can't, won't, give up, not good enough. Whereas the growth mindset is I can, I will, I'll try, I'm
Mhm.
going to master this, I'm going to repeat it, I'm going to practice. It's the change of from being there's no way that I'm going to get out of this situation to I'm going to try my hardest to get out of this situation. I think that
Mhm.
that's very important. Okay. More things like replace emotional eating. Oh, how many times have you gone out and bought yourself a bag of chips and crunched on your chips? And it's not because, or ice cream or whatever,
Uh-huh.
and it's because I guess why other people smoke or some people drink. It's
Mhm.
because you're frustrated and you need something that will kind of help you disconnect from that. And so I was thinking like more healthy rewards. I like to have fruit and veg and but don't get me wrong, I love goodies. I'm not a sweet person, but I do like salty. So
Mhm.
and play your own soundtrack, like music. You need.
Mhm.
I find that when I get in the car after a day's work and just on the way home, I blast out some music that I like and it makes me feel better. One of the things that I've done, because I'm living in Spain and I'm kind of stranded here for the time being,
Mhm.
I've downloaded like Canadian radio stations. I found this one app, and I found radio stations in Vancouver, which is where I'm from. So anytime I'm in the car, I'm listening to that. So it's a little piece of home that's with me when I'm in the car or when I'm around the house doing housework or working or whatever. It's a piece of
You have
home.
to find those little things that make you happy and do it. Like, look forward to, even if it's as silly as, oh, my favorite show comes on, let me get all this done so I can sit down and watch my favorite show. Or
Yeah.
um, you know, I just saw a clip that Michelle Obama likes knitting. That's how she coped a lot through in her new book that she wrote. She talked about knitting, and then she talked about how she does it. She does it to relax. And
Uh-huh.
I actually knit as well. So I
Yeah,
do.
you're great at it as well.
Thank you. I like doing that to relax as well. So we have to find those things to kind of disconnect, and sometimes to rejuvenate, the importance of rejuvenating and then going back to it, taking a step away. And those, I think that falls under those reflection exercises, like you kind of
Exactly,
like
yeah.
step away, deep breaths, reflect, do something you enjoy, and then you can always go back with it with a fresh set of eyes or a fresh brain or something like that.
Well, and not just that, it's like who's toxic, why are they toxic, and what can I do to avoid this toxic person? Or like sometimes do you remember that we had this incident, and I'm not going to mention any names, but we had this incident with this one person that we were talking across because the offices were open plan,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
we were talking across that, and somebody came and gave us a piece of their mind and then stopped talking to us because we actually responded. I mean, like, we're not the only ones that talk here. It's, like, why would you choose us and pick on us? And I think it was a little bit because we, not because of the noise we were making, but because of that positive energy that we were reflecting, and this person was negative and not happy, and so in the end this person did not speak to us for some time, but I made it a point of saying good morning to her every single day, and even though she didn't respond, and in the end, like, she was very appreciative of that, and she actually said thank you, and she apologized. So sometimes you don't know what's going on with the person and what's going on with that person's life, and maybe they're toxic, and it's not because of you it comes out that way, but you're not the reason, but just a trigger, because something that you do does not go along with what this person you know, is feeling at the moment or is going through, and so forth. And then a little bit along the lines, moving on to like the last part,
Mhm.
is playing the swap it game, where you have like a negative or unconstructive thought and you try to turn it into something positive, which goes along as well with the growth versus the fixed mindset, where you try to convince yourself or to give yourself a pep talk if there's nobody there to give it to you.
Yes. So understand, giving yourself that pep talk and motivating yourself is key, because it could be just a roller coaster ride. We're gonna have our ups and downs, and a lot, has
Well, that
happened.
happens to everyone, I guess.
Yeah.
It's life. Life is not always a happy place. There's illness, there's tragedy, there's all sorts, and it's the way you face that and your support system, and
Mhm.
that help you out of that.
Exactly.
Okay, so I've included these three links because they speak about mindful teachers, and I can't remember if I told you about a mindfulness session that we had around mid-November or so.
Yes, I
I
recall you
found,
talking about that.
yeah, I
Yes.
found it very interesting, and I think that like when you're going through something that is negative, and like walking away and kind of bringing yourself to like thinking about yourself,
Mhm.
and trying to just take a deep breath and deal with that, rather than getting annoyed or shouting or screaming or crying or whatever. It's just like taking a step back and reflecting. I think that's important, and mindfulness is really helping, even though, as with everything, Roz, nowadays they're starting to criticize UDL, mindfulness, all sorts. I mean, really?
Yeah, that's true. It's always going to have everything that you it's going to have some positive and negative criticism to it. So it's expected. It is expected. So, but
I would,
definitely,
yeah,
definitely, I will make sure that we include these links in the description box.
yeah. And
Yes.
particularly the last one, Maite is a colleague that works very close to where I am, about an hour's drive. She's at the
Mhm.
school in Marbella here in Spain. And she's actually a coach, a mindfulness coach, and she deals with emotional intelligence. And if you go to her website, you can find like a set of activities and exercises that you can do with your students from the beginning. And it's focused on teachers and students and how students can rein in their anxiety when they're facing exams and that sort of thing. And
Mhm.
I think that they're very useful. And that's why I included it as part of my principal project, you know, my educational project and my whole philosophy behind my leadership.
Definitely. So I'll
So,
make sure that I include those links in the description box as well
okay.
of our YouTube channel. Yes.
All right. So that is it for this week. Be sure to join us again next week because we're going to have a special guest, right, Roz?
Yes, we're going to have Dr. Amadou Baba speaking about social and political education of students of color. So he will be joining us on our next podcast. So let's look forward to hearing from him and seeing him soon.
Well, that's one of our positive New Year's resolutions. We decided that we were going to include guest speakers as well. So
Yes.
this next week, we're going to have Dr. Baba, and in a few weeks, we're going to have some other colleagues, but I'm not going to reveal any surprises because I think that that one will be very engaging, motivational, and well, not that we aren't motivating and engaging and motivational. I hope that we give teachers a positive perspective, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And
Finally, support the
support the
cause.
cause.
Yes. If you are like hearing these podcasts and would like to continue and click that subscribe button and the notification bell. Also, you can get merchandise that kind of supports our Education Matters campaign at bonfire.com using the code first time 23. You'll get 25% off. And I will also include the link of this into the description box as well. So don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button and hit the notification bell.
Okay.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us this time. We hope to see you next time with our guest. It has been a joy, Carmen, as usual. So I'll be seeing you next time.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, Roz. Bye, everyone.
Bye.